members of these groups are former veterans who started their own businesses, have been in many, they're all in different phases of that business, and they're a great networking resource because I get a lot of information, and I've made a lot of friends that we continue to talk from networking events and other business owners. It's one thing to go to a class and be given some paper and say this is how this is done and this is how that is done. It's another thing when you can sit around and maybe have a beer with somebody or two people or three that already have been through this process, tell your stories, learn from them, share what you've learned.
Hello, everybody. Here we are again, yet another episode of NanaTalks podcast. And today I have the pleasure to talk with Jeff Anderson. He is the co founder, president, and owner of the ATAG distribution. And he is working with the electrical solution. I've never talked with anybody from this specific industry, so it should be a super interesting conversation. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing what I can and hopefully help some other business owners.
I have no doubts about that. If you're okay, I would love to start with your transition from being at service, being at a Marine, correct?
Correct? Yep.
Yeah, and then you started quite impressive career, at least according to LinkedIn, at General Electrics from the junior position to the branch manager within 12 years. That's wow. That's the commitment.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I actually I was in the Marine Corps. I was getting out. It was after the Gulf War, and went to Somalia and had a opportunity to either stay in or try my luck in the private sector. So General Electric at the time was offering a program that they called the Junior Military Officer Program. It was a transition program for officers of all the branches coming out. I applied for it, and I ended up getting a job at GE Supply, which is a division of General Electric. And the good news was it was similar to what I did in the Marine Corps because I was a ground supply officer. So I was already distributing products and helping support customers. In this case, I got to transition and take what I had already learned over the last 5 years and work my way through the training program and becoming a member of General Electric and moving up in the business as time went on.
So they picked you very, very wisely, and they knew exactly what they were looking for, I assume.
Well, I don't know. They might have gotten lucky. You never know.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, yeah. So afterwards, you worked at a couple more companies, and now you're the owner of your own company. Like, and again, according to the LinkedIn, please correct me here. At 5, 6 years ago, you started this company.
Yeah, so I was with GE Supply, and I again started on the training program, worked my way up through, became a district manager. So I went from um, basically all the different positions within the business to being a branch manager and then district manager, running $100 million P&L out of Chicago. It was fantastic, great training, great learning experience. Transitioned to another business similar to GE Supply. They'd been purchased by a company at the time, and I moved to another electrical distribution company. And for whatever reason, I was getting to that point in my life where I thought, I've been doing this for other people for so long. Do I know enough? Have I been trained enough? Do I have the self-confidence to step out on my own and try to start a new business? And almost 6 years exactly. We are within a month of our 6-year anniversary, and we have been profitable and been growing since we started. Lots of great stories about that, but that's how I actually transitioned and started the business. More so because I wanted to control my own destiny and be my own boss and do things the way I felt that a small business owner would be able to capitalize on running a business and making decisions that were more in line with my goals and aspirations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And how long did it take to get to your break-even point and then turn into profitable business after you started?
So the first year and a half was, well, the first 6 months was just getting everything up and running and having to find a ERP system and learn the system, and before we could even transact orders. Once we got going, we were profitable probably within the first 12 months, closer to 14 months, because we didn't have a whole lot of investment. We were mostly transactional and shipping material directly to customers. One of the things that happened, unfortunately, um, just as we were hitting our stride to start getting in a groove, COVID hit. So we transitioned, and we ended up selling to a lot of our customers that were buying electrical before the construction market shut down, selling them PPE. So we were able to pivot and sell gloves and hand sanitizers and masks and anything that would help protect the employees. And because they still had certain jobs that they had to go to and certain job sites and all. Um, so that set us back a little, but I would say we had about a year of that going through that iteration, um, and then we invested a bunch of money. And I wanted to bring in inventory, and I wanted to provide employees with an actual bring on employees that were actually our employees with salary and benefits and 401k and all that. So that set us back a little, but I knew that investment was going to get us to the next level, and since then we've been profitable.
Mm. That's like, in a nutshell, great story of how you can be and how you should be very flexible and adaptive, no matter like even in the face of the black swan, which essentially COVID turned to be for every business around, not
Hmm.
only this country but all over the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very important. Uh, so the electrical solutions, when we were talking about them, does it also cover everything connected to the green energy, or you are not working with this specific sphere?
No, it does actually. We started by focusing on the block. I call it the blocking and tackling of electrical distribution, the pipe and the wire and light bulbs and light fixtures and things that would help electricians either maintain a facility, or whether it was new construction, and it could be in any market. We were pretty agnostic as far as who we were going after and serving, just to get revenue going. But what we noticed, and initially what I saw based on my previous experience, LED lighting has always been a big push. You're able to replace old technology with technology that consumes less energy, better for the planet, reduces carbon footprint. Get taking mercury-filled lamps off the grid and disposing of and recycling of them properly. And that once you're doing that and you're in a facility and you're working with people, they're always asking for other things that you could do and provide and supply. And that's where the opportunity for EV charging stations came in, when we were able to come in and not only provide the chargers themselves, but we have engineers on staff that can design and specify for the specific need of the customer, the types of chargers, the amount of chargers, what it'll take to install, what the payback is. And that morphed into solar. So we now can go into a company, business, a house, whoever it might be, homeowner, and talk to them about reducing their energy output with LED lighting and lighting controls, with EV charging for the parking lot, parking structure, with solar on the roof, or a solar garden, or a solar carport. We have the ability to, as a solutions provider, bring them a holistic approach to saving energy, reducing, like I mentioned, the carbon footprint. But also, one of the things that blossomed out of this was companies telling me that they were looking for ways to enhance the employee experience and allow employees to, for example, if the employer doesn't have EV chargers in their parking lot or their parking garage, that might turn away possible employees because they want or own an EV vehicle and they want to have a place to park and plug it in. So that was
That's
something I didn't
interesting.
even think about.
Yeah,
Or they're very employees who are very conscious about the environment. If they work for a company that is putting their money where their mouth is, and they have solar on the roof, and they are doing things with lighting, and they are doing things to save energy, which eventually reduces the load on the grid, that's a big deal. And I never thought of that when I was having these conversations, and the light went on. I said, yeah, this is really about people. It's about making sure that the people that are working in the facilities and in the space, they feel like their company is making a difference.
Yeah, it is truly important. And do you feel that there is, I don't know, when you're working with these companies, that there is a supplier, do you get a lot of support from the government programs? Because I keep getting a lot of information about the fact that there are a lot of incentive and support programs to make sure that all these initiatives will be implemented. But I'm not sure, like on the fields, like can you feel them?
We definitely feel them, and I know that there's a lot of different programs that the government offers. But we have one thing that's interesting about my journey. When I started my business, I wasn't aware of what the SBA did to support small business, business, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses. So I was focused on the commercial private sector. About 3 years into the business, I learned about what the SBA provides to help you get certified and go through that process. I did that in September of 21. We became certified with the SBA and the federal government as a service disabled veteran-owned small business. That opened the door to a number of opportunities with local, state, and federal projects. And what it did was it allowed prime contractors who had set aside goals to meet to help grow and help the smaller businesses grow and help the SBA. It opened the door for us to come into those places and not just be another distributor. We were a service disabled veteran owned small business distributor that could provide the materials, the electrical solutions, and help them meet the goals that the government was setting out. And I think it's for businesses that start from scratch that are trying to break in. It's really hard when you're going against billion-dollar plus companies who have been around for a long time and have the breadth and scope and depth to basically do everything. It allows us to at least have an opportunity to compete, and I think that's the best benefit of the program. So I'm happy I did it. I'm happy I've made great friends throughout this, and the networking's been fantastic, and it's really opened us from being a small regional player to providing product across the country through many government organizations. And I like to brag, we're also selling material to the embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan through the State Department. So had you told me that yes, you'll probably be shipping
How about
light
that?
bulbs overseas, I would have said, no, I don't think you're talking to the right guy.
That's fantastic. Never could even imagine something like that. Wow. And getting back to the green energy, in your opinion, like and based on the different projects, I'm sure that you've seen over these years, what is the most effective and what type of the green energy has the brightest future in United States? I mean, wind, solar, hydrogen. I'm keep getting again different numbers from different perspectives, but you are working with that. That's your
Yeah,
bread and butter.
I think that the easiest, number one, the easiest to implement, and the one that's been supported longest is solar. The the nice thing about solar is every home has the potential to put solar panels on the roof. Depending on they have the sunlight needed if there's not shaded and whatnot from trees and all. But so that means that every homeowner has the opportunity to save on their energy bill and possibly even get paid back credits from the utility. So the cost to get into it is relatively inexpensive based on the paybacks, and the solar panels are becoming smaller and more effective, providing more energy. And then you have the huge opportunity with all of the commercial buildings that have rooftops that are flat that could be using solar. So there's the majority of rooftops don't have solar. So that's a huge opportunity. And now we're seeing the utilities actually putting in solar farms where they're taking wide swaths of land and adding solar. So the solar technology is not very difficult. It isn't very difficult to install. It isn't very difficult to maintain. It's accessible to pretty much everybody. So I think that's the place where we still have, we're making great strides. A lot of opportunity continue to grow there. And then I think next would be EV charging. And that's just a matter of getting the infrastructure laid out so that there are enough chargers and charging stations to ensure that you don't have EV car owners with range anxiety because they're nervous about running out of juice, depending on where they're trying to get to, making sure there's reliable, workable EV chargers where they say they are. And just making people feel more comfortable and says, yes, I will buy that EV charger now because I know that I'm not going to be stuck on the side of the road waiting for somebody to come and give
Oh
me a
yeah,
charge.
that's one of the reasons, like for the pushbacks, we can see the or at least economists can see within the last three, I believe, years. The last year, the worst one, when the more and more and more people are thinking about buying hybrid vehicles
Mm.
rather than fully electrical because of the first of all very costly repairs, and secondly, yes, because of the range.
Yeah.
They're scared that they're going to be stuck. They're scared that they will not be able to get any help, and therefore hybrid seems to be more practical from that perspective. But yeah, if we will have the like the larger infrastructure, most probably at least some amount of these problems can be solved. I would
Yep.
wonder what's your opinion on the electric or hybrid trucks, if we can see them on our roads in the nearest future.
Yeah, I think that that's a really great opportunity, especially if you think about a lot of the deliveries that are made in cities. And you've got, the roads are grid systems basically, and whether it's a self-driving vehicle or not, having the number of vehicles that are delivering products, goods, and services within the cities, if you could remove the carbon and the actual fossil fuels that are being used up and the pollution, I think that would be a tremendous area to focus on. And you're seeing it now in buses, like mass transportation. There's certain cities that are transitioning their buses to be electric. I think that again, you can create hubs outside of the cities where you can store and stage the vehicles and have the charging and all, and they drive into the cities and do their deliveries and all, and there's no emissions, and they come back and they charge up overnight, or they run 24/7, but they're rotating the fleet. I think that'd be a fantastic way to move from what we're currently at today. And for the long haul, maybe that is the hybrid method. If you are going to be transitioning LTL, transporting materials LTL, then
Hmm.
then a hybrid form makes sense. And it's like anything else. Early adoption of new technology tends to there are always hiccups. There are always things that were unforeseen. But the great news is all these early adoption things turn into mainstream if we give it enough time and we work through the problems and work out the bugs.
Yeah, I with one of my previous guests, we talked about a little bit about robotica and self-driving cars, if that's feasible and possible. And to be totally honest, I tend to believe that the answer would be yes. We will see more and more and more self-driving cars on our roads. Most probably, that's going to be electrical vehicles or at least hybrid. And same goes to trucks and trailers, because and logistic and everything connected to that industry is just huge, right?
Yeah,
And
it
of
is.
course all the infrastructure surrounding this industry has to build properly, and I envisioned that everything connected to the green energy and infrastructure, I mean EV infrastructure, and by EV I mean like the family cars and up to trucks, will inevitably become bigger and bigger and bigger. But like the other side of everything is the storage, energy storage solution, right? Because okay, we can charge our cars, we can gain some solar or wind energy or whatever, right? But we need to storage, and this is very important solutions, right, in maximizing effectiveness of renewable energy. And I'm wondering what's your point of view on that question.
Well, I think like anything with the technology itself, we're talking about where do we get the lithium for the lithium ion batteries, and how do we make the batteries more capable of storing more energy for longer periods of time. And that just comes with improvements in the technology. And now that we're focused on it, uh, uh, in the past we didn't even have plants in the United States that made the batteries, and now we're looking at onshoring that technology and that manufacturing capability. And I think it's going to be, as I said earlier, you put a bunch of smart people together from an industry perspective to come up with a solution and improve on what we currently have. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to be. We're going to have, my opinion, we'll have smaller batteries that have more charging capacity, that have a charge that lasts longer, that allows for this adoption of solar on roofs and homes to store the power local at the site. Same thing with facilities. I think it's just a matter of time. I equate it to to rockets. You look at the rockets that were taking people to space and satellites back in the day, and now you look at the rockets that are taking off and coming back and landing, landing upright, and it's just amazing. So I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm an optimist. Um, we'll figure it out.
Oh yeah, no, God, I've seen this amazing video from SpaceX from every angle, how they've just landed into these tiny chopsticks. God,
Yeah.
this is it's incredible. We're starting
Yeah.
to dream about the stars once again.
Yes,
Like
definitely.
that was that dream, like I believe in the middle of 60s, and now we are getting back to that same vibe, same dreams. And yeah, I'm here with you. I tend to believe that we will figure that out, and I really, really hope that we will not lose our track as we lost it somewhere, right,
Yeah.
in the other questions.
Yeah.
Getting back to the Phil stories, what would be the biggest, I'd say, obstacle you are facing when you are working with the bigger companies and you are acting as the supplier, and how you are overcoming them? It's just rather than, an advice for the small business owners who are trying
Mhm.
to find their way, and maybe they are
Yeah.
facing the same obstacles.
Yeah, it's the everything that we do is built upon relationships. So the people that want to work with us, or the people that we want to work with, they need to know who we are. They need to know that we're reliable. They need to know that we have experience. And some of the things that are obstacles, especially when you start getting into larger projects and all, do we have the bandwidth from a backing financially, whether it's a line of credit, or are we able to, if needed, get a bond that equals the amount required for the project? The customers want to make sure that we don't have an issue if our vendors aren't paying us, and that we're going to continue to have the financial resources to proceed with the project and see it through to the finish line. So that's an initial barrier, just because when you're starting out new, you tend not to have that. It takes time to build that up. It takes time to get the banks to realize that you know what you're doing. You're serious. The underwriters look at you and they say, yes, we feel confident you're going to repay this line of credit or this loan. Um, so that's one thing. And then the other thing is just when you don't have a performance track record, when you don't have the ability to say, yes, as my business, we've done projects of this size, scope, whatever. Um, Now we can say, well, the people that are employed here and myself, we have done these projects and managed them, but it wasn't with this company, it was with other companies. So we have the knowledge, we understand how to make it work, but we haven't done it as a tech distribution. So and we work our way around those through starting out taking smaller bites. So let us have a smaller piece of this project. Let us work in an area here where you can get to know us, we can get to know you, and build up some rapport. And then as we prove to you that we can succeed and support you, then give us a little bigger job. Give us a little bigger job. It just takes time. It's 6 years of doing this now, and we're a lot farther along than when we started. We have a lot farther to go, but again, we couldn't have done it without the steps that we've taken along the way.
Yeah. Do you remember your first contract?
Um, our very first contract uh, Was with the, and when you say contract, you mean a large purchase order, or like,
Just the first customer, because I do remember, like, I know from my own experience as the startup founder once, right? The very first customer, the very first money on your like bank account, like the first income, you tend to remember.
yeah, we actually had it was a number of small, it was one customer, but they were buying, we got set up with our first vendor, which was a lighting manufacturer. And once we got set up, they were buying their lamps from us. So, and again, it was, they gave us a purchase order for $130 and we shipped them 2 cases of lamps. And then something, they gave us another purchase order for $200. And so it was just, yeah, it wasn't, I wish I could say it was like, oh, it was this great contract that we got, was a big one. And it wasn't. It was just it was one of those where I was excited to have it because it was the first time I actually processed it through our ERP system. It was the first
Mm.
order. So that was more important to me, to see how to make sure I did it correctly and was able to pick, pack, ship, and then invoice and process everything. So yeah, you never forget those.
Yeah, can imagine. And do you remember also how you, or like you mentioned that this is very important to build up your connection not only with the vendors and with the company you're going to work with or partner with, but also with the banks. How did you start to build up your relationship with the banks and to build up your financial history so you could get those loans? Because yeah,
So
that's not easy.
no, it's not. And I think what small business owners uh, sometimes don't realize, you have to have an actual relationship with somebody at the bank. You have to try to find somebody that can become a mentor per se, or someone that you can be a sounding board. And I started out trying to work with the large banks, and unfortunately, because I had no history, even though I was working with one of the large banks and I was using them for my day-to-day banking, which was fine. They have great. All the banks have really nice tools for online banking. I
You
could
mean
not
like
get anywhere.
personal line?
No, it was actual our business banking. I mean, any
Oh,
bank
mhm.
will set you up with a checking account and a savings account,
Of
and then
course.
with the business banking, I got the bill pay going and the ACH and all that. That was fine, and I'd worked with one of these banks for the first 3 years, and then I interviewed other banks, and they were all big banks, and I wish someone would have told me up front, go to your regional banks, go to your local smaller banks, and go to banks that are focused on things that you're focused on. And in our case, because it was renewable energy and solar and electrical LED lighting and all, I was able to find a bank that also was investing in and we're in the Minneapolis St. Paul area, but they invested in this market, and they were investing in renewable energy companies and properties that were going to install items, solar and EV charging and all. So they had a similar mindset, and they were the ones that gave me my first line of credit, and I wasn't even banking with them. I opened a checking account just so I had an account opened, and then they would allow me to get a line of credit. And the more I tried with the bigger banks, thinking that's what I needed, the more I realized, no, that's not what I needed. I'm not big. I don't need um, what they're offering at this time. I need what this bank's offering. And I switched all my banking over, and I was nervous because I'm like, regional bank, do they have online? Is their online system the same as the big banks, and is it easy to maneuver and use? It was. It's been fantastic. I sit down with my banker twice a year. I actually have a banker who knows me. We go to lunch. We do a financial review. One of the big things I've always told them was, I never want to walk in here and have to retell my story. I want you to know where our business is, and I want you to know that why we're here and what I'm trying to do and where my growth plan is and how I see this line of credit extending and getting bigger, and you're helping me grow. It's been a great relationship. So that's my biggest advice to anybody who's starting a business, or been in business for a while and not getting the, I don't want to say the respect, or just not get, you're just not big enough for these big banks to get the service you're looking for. Try a smaller one. Try a regional bank. And believe it or not, those regional banks have networking opportunities and events, and you meet other people and other business owners and other people that have lines of credit, and you share stories, and it's to me it helps. it helps with my business, and it helps with my confidence knowing that my bank's going to be there for me because they know me.
Yeah, of course. And you mentioned that they also invested in the companies like yours. So have you not only opened the credit line with them and loan line, but also have you seen them as the possible investors in your cap table, maybe?
We haven't, just because in our company, for me to keep the 51% ownership of the business and all, we're not set up to take on investors at this time. But that's a great point because I never even thought of that. So as we grow and get bigger, I wouldn't doubt that they would want to invest in a business like ours based upon what we're doing. We're 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 executing on what they're trying to see happen within this market, and that's cleaner energy, more renewable energy.
Yeah, and I tend to believe that the companies exactly like yours have bright future. Like within the 5, 10 years, I would imagine that you can show this, unicorn-ish speed, so-called, right? Triple, triple, double, double within
Mm,
the 5 years when you're hitting toward your exit or IPO or whatever. And like, I tend to believe that again, exactly companies like yours have that great potential comparing to any other companies, right? To
yeah.
hit that IPO in 5, maybe 6, maybe 10 years, and yeah, and I can easily imagine how you can get there, and I can easily imagine how I can buy some of your stocks and like to make some money out of it.
Sure.
I'm a
No,
big
exactly.
fan of the so-called like boring companies, right? I'm trying to see we're going to be the next trucking company, which will lead to IPO, or the next electrical solution company, which again will head toward IPO. So yeah, I tend to believe that that might be the great way for your company to to expand. And getting back to the EV infrastructure just for a second, because I know, and since I'm living in California and I'm hearing a lot of information about the ideas circling in California to move toward the fully EV infrastructure and only EV available on the roads and be even eligible to be on the roads of California. I was wondering like if you have like feeling those vibes, especially as the certified veteran owned businesses, because that's going to be the government contracts, right?
Hmm.
If that's going to happen, most probably those going to be the government supported contracts to build up the infrastructure in California. Because I mean, the one thing is to write the law or whatever. The bill doesn't really matter what's going to hit the ground, but as much as you'd like to say everybody just stick to electrical vehicles, if you are not providing infrastructure, it's not going to happen.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think that the government is always they tend to lead in some of these areas, and we've always been uh, influenced by what happens on the West Coast. It seems when new technologies come in, when the whole push to start getting rid of fluorescent lamps, move to LED requirements like that all starts and incubates and grows, and then it spreads across the country, and so it's coming this way. I think that from my perspective as a service disabled veteran owned small business that has government contracts and already sells EV chargers and solar for that matter, but EV chargers specifically, I think there's going to be great opportunity because the government's going to help support and push the infrastructure, and that's going to take product and people that know how to install it and then maintain it too, because it's not you don't just set up a bank of EV charging stations and then walk away. They need to be serviced, and they have computers in them, and they have the smart technology for the payment systems and all, and they have to also be tied back to the grid. And so it's a it's going to be, I believe, a great opportunity for companies like mine to be engaged up front and help support the initiative.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the very last question, if I may, could be you mentioned a couple times the ERP system that you started from finding the right one, setting it up, and then that your first customer was important for you, not only because that those were the first money on your bank account, but also you had your chance to test ERP system. Why that was so important?
So one of the things that GE instilled in me was the ability to understand the numbers and ensure that the financials that we were providing and producing were accurate. So every conversation that I have with a bank, every conversation that I have with a customer, every conversation that I have with my employees, with my vendors, I need to know that the data that I have that I'm using to support my conversation is accurate and valid. I also want to ensure that the financial reporting that I'm providing should, because we're in the government space as well, should we be audited, I want to make sure that that it meets all the gap requirements and it's always correct. There may be a mistake here or there based upon a credit being posted wrong or a debit or put to the wrong account. But that was big for me because that gives us legitimacy. And uh, we started with one ERP system, and then we had to convert it to another because I needed to go to a cloud-based system to allow me to do business wherever I was. Not have to go through a VPN, not be have it tied to an internal computer hard drive in an office. So we've actually transitioned to that about 3 years ago. But in my opinion, what a good ERP system does for you, it allows your business to scale, and we have the ability because the processes are all there. It's just a matter of we can add as many orders to it, we can add more vendors, we can add more customers. It's all the same blocking and tackling, key punching. You can just do more when you have a good ERP system. And like I said, earlier, I've got folks that I rely on to help with my business. So if I'm sending my financials to my accounting team that actually does my taxes, I need to know that they're comfortable with the system I have, that they feel that the numbers are reliable for when they do the taxes. And again, going back to the conversations that I have with all these people, I just need I need to as a business owner, I just need to know what is going on with my business, and the numbers don't lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And but someone can argue that ERP, I might be wrong here, but from my knowledge, even the smallest ERP is pretty costly solution. So
It, it depends. It depends because you can get online solutions that don't have an advanced inventory management system, or they don't have certain bells and whistles that you need. In and I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I believe my ERP system is about $5,000 to $6,000 a year. And if you average that out and you just and that's the brains of your or the repository of your business, and you have all the information a few clicks away that you need and the ability to pull out reports and all, it's well worth the investment. It's something that if you don't have an ERP system, if you're trying to do things with spreadsheets, if you're trying to do things manually, there's more opportunity for mistakes. There's more opportunity to lose data. ERP system, if you get a good ERP system, it has checks and balances. It won't allow you to do certain things based upon accounting principles. It provides support where you may need if you're trying to run your own, you may need your own IT people. You may need the added costs that you don't really see up front. So if you find the right one, and it has to be tailored to what your business needs are. Every business is different. My business, I mentioned, we needed an advanced inventory management system. We needed the ability to pick, pack, and ship. We need the ability to bin locate products. We need the ability to apply cash discounts and rebates. We need the ability to have an easy function for returns and credits. These are things that some businesses don't require. They don't have inventory. So those systems probably wouldn't be as robust or as expensive. So again, it just depends on what you're comfortable with. But best advice is find one that meets the requirements of the people who you're giving the information to, especially accountants, accounting firms, and people doing your taxes, and also that you feel confident and comfortable that what you're putting in there is actually valid and legitimate.
right, that all makes sense. So, what would be your advice for the folks who are thinking about their transition? And in many cases, at least from what I'm hearing, talking to the guys who are still serving, they're more and more and more thinking not about building the career in the private space or whatever, but instead opening their companies right after they're going to make the transition to civilian life. What would be your advice, maybe kind of checklist? Because I know that many folks are trying to build their checklist to what
Hmm.
they have to take care or think about before they're going to make that happen,
Yep.
to make it
So
more comfortable.
sure, no. My advice is go for it. Uh, it's a great opportunity to come from the service and then run your own business, whatever that might be. The first place I would start as soon as you get out is go to Apex Accelerators. They're part of the SBA. They provide all the helpful information that you need to get your business set up, whatever in whatever form you want to set that up in, whether it's an LLC, a corporation, partnership. They'll work you through all that. The other thing that they'll do is they'll help you with the transition, meaning there are organizations that will I want to call it boots to business. I think it might one of them might be called, where they actually you can start working with these folks before you get out of the service. If you have a business plan and you're looking to, you want to create a business, and they'll help you with your business planning, and they'll help you transition so that you can get a lot of that, the things that you don't think about when you're starting a business, that checklist that you mentioned, you can start checking off the boxes of what will be beneficial to you. And then in addition to working with the SBA and Apex, and by the way, they're free, so that's a great resource. There are SCORE mentors out there that are free as well. They're part of the SBA, and there are a number of veteran organizations that will help you with certifications. Whether it doesn't have to be a federal government, but the National Veteran Business Development Council provides a certification program. Then they also help introduce you to potential customers. The National Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses, Novoba, they're part of one. Disability In is linked to Novoba. That's another good organization. The Society of American Military Engineers is a good organization. And all these groups are, the members of these groups are former veterans who started their own businesses, have been in many, they're all in different phases of that business. And they're great networking resource because I get a lot of information, and I've made a lot of friends that we continue to talk from networking events and other business owners. It's one thing to go to a class and be given some paper and say this is how this is done and this is how that is done. It's another thing when you can sit around and maybe have a beer with somebody or two people or three that already have been through this process, tell your stories, learn from them, share what you've learned. A lot of resources. Don't do it on your own. Don't try to do it on your own. Don't think you're all alone. Um, there are a tremendous amount of people just like me that are willing to help and support, because as small business owners, we realize we rely on each other. I mean, at the end of the day, um, we all want to work with the big customers and the big contracts and all, but we do a lot more with the smaller businesses that we just run across, and then we realize we can support each other. And veterans supporting veterans is a pretty strong, powerful way to have a business and support the community.
Yeah, well, yeah. At first, walk, then run. Right? There was
Exactly.
nothing wrong with working and supporting small businesses at first to get to the big and then huge companies at the end.
Yep. Yep. You have
Well,
to
thank you
you
so
have to
much.
prove your process. That's basically it.
Exactly.
Prove your process. Yep.
Exactly. I do remember that you've already kind of, shared that idea a little bit, that at first, and you were absolutely okay with that. Let us start to work only with the tiny piece of the project. And then as we're going to prove ourselves as very responsible and like good company, you will give us a little bit bigger
Yep.
job or contract or whatever. And there you go. Well, thank you so much. That was yet another great episode of Nana Talks podcast. This time I had a pleasure to talk with the Jeff Anderson. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay.